The God of War franchise, a series that has spawned from the creative mind of David Jaffe, where he has decided to capitalize on the newly created character action genre, pioneered by Hideki Kamiya's Devil May Cry, while injecting it with his passion for the Greek pantheon, while taking inspiration from other works that he enjoys, like heavy metal and Indiana Jones. So when it came down to its 2005 release, it was a critical and commercial success, quickly making it one of Sony's flagship titles that is still running to this day, with the series facing a change in direction. So this begs the question, does the very first God of War still hold up after 18 long years? That will be answered in this first episode of the God of War Retrospective, starting with
Foul beast! I will send you back to the depths of Hades!
God of War is a hack and slash that is structured similarly to the first Devil May Cry, with some major tweaks that help differentiate it from that game, where it had puzzles and platforming but it placed a much heavier emphasis on combat. However, God of War prioritizes both equally, where for every combat encounter, you will find a platforming and puzzle section that is equal in length, and sometimes puzzles and combat do intersect quite a bit. After all, we are talking about a game that has Indiana Jones as one of its inspirations, so expect to see a lot of set pieces that involve making it across a rope while having adversaries trying to knock you out, with Tomb Raider-like sections that involve a heavy dose of climbing, balancing and mindfulness of traps, with various environmental hazards, plus a temple run section, swing sections that last for the majority of God of War's runtime, that has you explore a lot of breathtaking environments that tend to go for a 360 loop like in DMC1, instead of giving you the feeling of being trapped in an environment that changes in an attempt to kill you by morphing in various ways. However, the environments in this title usually wind up changing as a result of your own actions as Kratos, as these locations are usually trying to kill you in an attempt to maintain their own status quo, with all of the booby traps placed in Pandora's temple. As for its own combat system, it isn't anything as in-depth as Devil May Cry. Well, it doesn't have to be. What's on offer here is a blast to play, since the star of the show is Kratos, an absolute madman of a Spartan warrior who goes around slaughtering fools in the most gruesome way possible, in a giant fit of rage. So the intent isn't really on having you combo a bunch of dudes to show off how cool you look, while not exactly being a fight for survival where you barely make it out alive by the skin of your teeth like in Ninja Gaiden. It wants you to go into the arena, crush the ever-loving shit out of them, hacking, mutilating, decapitating, ripping and tearing, with the added cheek clapping of course. So it has you doing this with the very well-rounded and versatile Blades of Chaos. Two swords attached with chains at the end of the handles, with lightning-fast attacks that allow you to get in multiple hits in rapid succession, while supporting hard-hitting heavy attacks that just do a crap ton of damage. You can mix and match both of these to unleash some of the most brutal-looking maneuvers ever animated in a video game, with various spins at the end, with a ton of heavy slams. But you aren't tied to the ground with these blades, no, as holding the heavy attack button will make Kratos launch the enemy, as they in fact can be juggled quite well in this title, with light attacks along with extra moves that are designed to keep you a bit on the airborne side. Oh, you can even yank some of the regular enemies around in mid-combo, effectively slamming enemies into one another. As per secondary melee weapon, look no further than the Zangetsu-looking Blade of Artemis. Despite it lacking the range of the Blades of Chaos, however, this thing more than makes up for it with speed and power, since the light attacks are faster, yet the heavy attacks are a bit more focused, which is quite good for keeping your foes close as opposed to losing a far-off enemy into a juggle, which makes it a good secondary weapon to the Blades of Chaos, as most players will have a preference to the chain blades, as they offer far more range and flexibility when it comes to their repertoire. We all know that a lot of character action games usually come with some form of a projectile. In the Devil May Cry series, Dante had loads of firearms, while Ryu had shurikens and arrows in Ninja Gaiden. In God of War, Kratos has access to magic given to him by the gods of Olympus, starting off with Poseidon's Rage, an AoE attack that allows Kratos to electrocute everything on screen, that becomes more and more powerful the more you level it up, making it a great get off me button if you ever get swarmed by enemies. Next up is the Lightning of Zeus, this game's ebony and ivory variant. You can rapid fire them bolts similarly to how Dante fires off his iconic dual pistols. Get this, after a level up you can charge shot them bolts, confirming it to be this game's ENI. The other spell we have comes in the form of Medusa's head, that you get by forcefully ripping it apart from your own torso. Whoa! Talk about the well-deserved ability of freezing them punks to stone, to then get a few free hits in, crushing many minotaurs and cyclopses to dust. Last but not least, we're given the most broken magic trick in the game, the Armies of Hades, that lets Kratos summon the souls of the damned to help him axe off anyone trying to kill you. No joke, at base level, it can kill an entire horde of people, while juggling them, making moving through a lot of the tough gauntlets much easier. At times it killed entire hordes for me, like no joke. It's that overpowered at base level, no red orb dumping needed whatsoever. Just like most hack and slashes and other video games, you can upgrade your magic and blades by collecting the red orbs that are collected from killing enemies or finding it in chests, to spend on leveling up your gear to unlock more abilities while making your magic more powerful in the process. While the aforementioned Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden games have usually featured a ranking system at the end of each mission with a set criteria to be fulfilled, but God of War has no such thing, as the game demands that you go beast mode and take your time with the world that's been built by the devs, so there's no incentive from the game to vary up attacks, so to speak, with the game's accolade ranking system being more of a hit counter that goes up after hitting an enemy, even if the same move was being used. On the flip side, you can absolutely play this game as stylishly as you'd like, once the mechanics have been mastered. The Blades of Chaos as a weapon by design has quite the large potential for stylish play, just by the fact that they're flexible weapons on their own. Just take a look at what guys like Zesty usually pull off in this game. The potential for violently styling in this title is rock solid, I tell ya. If I'll be talking difficulty, it's not anything ball-busting as Ninja Gaiden, but I won't label it as an absolute cakewalk either. Oh, and surprise surprise, I will not be calling this game a button masher by any stretch of the imagination. The AI is anything but brain dead, as a lot of the foes come at you in hordes, with each enemy trying to attack you at the same time, where you have to block or dodge in due time. That's just the regular zombie dudes. When you rank in the creatures, you get a completely different result, with minotaurs that can absolutely wreck your shit, as they can rip off chunks of your HP who will grind you into dust if you are caught beating the square button at nauseam. Just make sure you know when to dodge and strike. Enter the satyrs, who have been meticulously designed to punish those dumb enough to simply mash square and triangle. These guys can block, dodge, they'll even slap you around if you ain't careful enough. Coupled with the fact that many enemy encounters around here are designed in a way to test how well you can use your own arsenal to manage the different enemy types who have completely different strategies to tackle each of them. On the topic of making it through tough encounters, this game comes with its own version of Devil Trigger with the Rage of the Gods that fills up by being on the offensive, making Kratos' attacks much more powerful, dealing more damage that tends to deplete much faster than Devil Trigger, without any way of deactivation. Yeah, it's a resource that is designed to be used only once. One thing this series has been quite infamous for is the constant reliance on quick time events, those push the button at the right time to progress the cutscene that is currently being played at the moment. Well, in this particular entry, they are used quite unintrusively. Just hear me out. When certain adversaries are about to die, a prompt of the circle button appears above their heads, so in turn, two options are presented. Either finish them off with the irregular combo, or push the grab command to initiate a QTE fatality, so it's all up to you. Want to kill him fast? Go for it. Feel like finishing some fools off with a QTE? Just push circle and enjoy the carnage. So it's entirely up to you. It's not being shoved down your throat in the middle of a cutscene, it's a decision you make while in gameplay, with each kill being more gruesome than the last. One thing to mention about the kill animation is that depending on the enemy type, you'll replenish a specific resource, meaning if you're low in magic, rip a Medusa's head off. Low in health, mash the circle button on one of the minotaurs to feed him some iron. So other than the much appreciated gory spectacle, plus getting the Cooch of Olympus, they can be used strategically to replenish a resource when there are no chests around. So the QTEs aren't that bad in this title, because you aren't tricked into watching a cutscene only for a button prompt to show up to offset you. In fact, it's placed when the player is within gameplay zen. As much as I've been praising this game, there are a few shortcomings to keep in mind. First off, the lack of weapon variety. In God of War, you only have 2 melee weapons. Only 2! Some people might say, come on Joe, this game was the first one in the series. It only came out in like, what, 2005? That is the point. 2005 was the year that brought us Devil May Cry 3 and Ninja Gaiden Black. Oh boy, and let me tell you, these games gave us some wonderful toys of destruction to play with. They can switch out at any time you like. Here you only have 2 weapons to work with, and magic ain't really much of a substitute for lacking weapon variety, but hey, it came out in the same year as DMC3, so weapon selection of that variety wasn't really an expectation in these kinds of games, with the only template being DMC1 as to how these games usually operate. but you could have just added a spear or something since Kratos is a Spartan, and these dudes tend to like their spears quite a bit. One other thing that holds this entry down is some of the booby-trap combat intersection moments that can border on the frustrating side of things, with the floor that keeps on opening in this specific combat encounter. The heavier you attack, the more the floor opens up. If you go too heavy and fail to get rid of the enemies in time, it'll open wide, punishing you for playing the game. And don't get me started on the desert section. Before walking into Pandora's temple, you gotta find 3 sirens to kill in this desert with a heavy-ass sandstorm, while being completely blindsided. Bruh, for real. The only way you'll ever go around to finding the sirens is by listening to a symphony. If you hear it, they're close by. If you don't, they're pretty far away, as you spend more than 1 hour, mind you, wandering around blindsided in this yellow mist, till Lady Luck decides to throw you a bone by giving you the siren because the game apparently felt sorry for you. By the way, guess how many boss fights God of War has? 5, 6, 7... Well, it only has 3. Hydra, Guardian, and Ares. That's all about it. So overall, God of War's gameplay loop provides a solid mix of exploration and intricate puzzle solving, emphasizing the adventurous feel that the game is going for, while providing solid combat that may not be as deep as other titles within the same genre. However, it's a very satisfying system that is a lot of fun to play, while offering quite a bit of opportunities for experimentation with this fighting system that wants you to play the game as maniacally as possible, delivering on the promise of,
you should play God of War because it'll get you laid. God of War is fucking rad.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
The Greek God of War series is what I would describe as a heavy metal opera that closely follows the descent of a warrior who has been betrayed by the very gods he spent an entire decade serving, leading him on a downward spiraling cycle of vengeance and bloodshed. This first game shows the beginning of that downward spiral into madness. I mean, the first thing you see after hitting that start button is the game's own poster boy throwing himself off a cliff to unalive himself, just to cut to a 3 weeks later flashback, letting you know that everything will lead back to this one moment where Kratos will attempt self-deletion. At first, the only thing you know about the titular warrior is that he's got a pretty tragic backstory that's kind of vague, which is intentional. The game tells you from the start that he's coping with his PTSD through doing the dirty work of the gods, banging them hoes, in the hopes of being able to forget what happened that night. But what happened on that one fateful evening is quite the unforgettable sin. However, the devs are quick to tell you that the God of War Ares had a major hand to play in the downfall of Kratos into depression and desperation. Out of that desperation, Kratos heads to the death-defining Temple of Pandora to fetch Pandora's box for a fighting chance to kill Ares. Kratos in this title ain't really the rage-filled god killer we see in God of War 2 and 3. Instead, we have sad and desperate Kratos. The guy hates himself for allowing a mad warmonger to trick and manipulate him into killing his own family in a blind fit of rage. All what he wants to do is put the past behind him. The only way he knows how to do that is by serving the gods of Olympus. At this point, they might be the only ones who can deliver him from his nightmares. Throughout the entire game, he feels a heavy amount of regret for what he did on that day, despite the random bouts of cruelty from him.
Thank you! Thank the gods you came back for me!
I didn't come back for you.
No!
He's at his most remorseful that we've ever seen him in the entire series. Despite the game taking place within the Greek pantheon, the main focus is on Kratos' tragedy and how his servitude to the gods doesn't really amount to much. The story of this game is kind of simplistic, however it's very well told. The writers made sure that you actually care and feel for Kratos due to how well he's characterized and voice acted by T.C. Carson, fully expressing the turmoil and PTSD the Ghost of Sparta is going through.
By the gods, what have I become?
You find yourself rooting for the ashen-skinned Johnny Sins to kill Ares. Upon finally getting to the second phase of the boss fight, it becomes a complete subversion of the entire game, where Ares taps into the Spartan's mind, recreating a hellish vision of that fateful night, with his deceased family center stage being attacked by none other than zombie-like depictions of Kratos, where you step in to protect your dead wife and daughter using the QTE button to give some of your health away to them, flipping one of the core mechanics on its head, to show the one thing that Kratos hates the most, being himself. So in an overall sense, the story told here is a masterfully crafted one that acts as a character study of a Spartan warrior who has let his desperation lead him to a power lust that led him to do something that he truly regrets.
So, you think you can conquer the Temple of the Gods, do you?
The visual presentation found in God of War on the PS2 is pretty damn impressive for what was achieved on the hardware at the time, with highly detailed character models and environmental structures, which is supported by the impeccable art style that captures the look and feel of a violently barbaric reality of ancient Greek myth, with breathtaking palaces that feel like they're key places of worship to some of these mythical beings, with the Temple of Pandora giving the vibe of the most dangerous place on planet Earth, with some of its traps coupled by the corpses of the many warriors who have failed to reach the elusive Pandora's box. I'm still not exactly sure how they managed to get here in the first place, but hey, they must have gone lucky. Despite the setting of ancient Greece, the atmosphere of this game is pretty damn gothic-ish, by having the temple's mad architect giving the place a beautiful decor that is intricately designed to invoke a sense of you're not welcome around here. And the palace will try and succeed in killing you where you stand, with various sections labeled as specific trials related to an Olympian god, as if it's a challenge given to you by one of them, with the Poseidon one having you go underwater with various traps, coupled with this real imagery of the aquatic maze. Then you get to the Hades section, being rather haunting and dreadful in nature, like what you'd find in a Devil May Cry environment, with very demonic looking decoration, to the architect's tomb being a nightmarish locale that is filled with many mountaintops with a ton of bottomless abysses. It's like the devs wanted you to know that the dude who built this place was a madman with a few screws loose up in his mind. On a side note, in one of the climbing sections, Kratos is on the side of a mountain in Pandora's temple, just to see the view of Kronos walking around carrying the temple on his backside. Bruv, what a breathtaking view. I can't believe this was pulled off on the PS2. They managed to make the protagonist feel tiny in this larger-than-life world by this set piece that could pass off as a painting. Later on in the adventure, the ghost of Sparta finds himself falling into the pits of Hades, also known as Hell. My boy, just look at this place. I'd imagine Satan calling it home sweet home, with the spiked pillars that are kind of annoying to scale, with the added red skies, with the skeletal platforms, making this depiction of the afterlife one of the most unforgettable looking landscapes ever to be visualized in a video game. So in short, the graphical fidelity of this title is nothing more than a visual masterpiece that still holds up in spite of all of the technological leaps made up until 2023, as the game is carried by its vibrant art style, portraying the world as dark and unsettling. As for the animations, Kratos' movements are as smooth as butter, displaying top-tier athleticism that would be required of a Spartan warrior to thrive in battle. The OST in God of War is a constant orchestral ballad that sells the whole experience, as opposed to other character action games that have atmospheric music play while exploration, to then have a hype techno or heavy metal track play while you're in the middle of combat. Instead, God of War opts for slower-paced atmospheric melodies while traversing the world, with the battle themes being a loud, bombastic ballad since the game takes place in ancient times as opposed to the modern world, like other hack-and-slash games usually do, well, the well-known ones anyway.
Mortal who had become the new God of War.
God of War is a character action game that still holds up to this day. While not being as mechanically complex as, say, Devil May Cry 3, it's still a tremendously enjoyable hack-and-slash, with a satisfying combat system that allows you to thrash everything in sight. With a weapon that is so versatile, it has a lot of combo potential on offer, with an epic Greek tragedy starring a layered and complex character, so for that it receives a solid S rank from me. Despite its shortcomings, this title still stands the test of time after 18 long years, which still makes it a title you should play in the year of 2023. God of War was supposed to be a standalone game, but it quickly became a critically acclaimed title for the PS2, rapidly gaining a large following, becoming one of Sony's best-selling games at the time. So naturally, Santa Monica Studios quickly got to work on the sequel, giving us the much-beloved God of War 2. So it begs the question, how well does the sequel hold up after 16 whole years? Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to catch the second episode of the God of War Retrospective when it drops, to find out how well God of War 2 holds up. This has been the Devil Joe signing out.